Imagine a palace so grand, so lavish, that people call it the most expensive mansion in America. But the story of the Breakers is more than marble halls and gilded ceilings. It's a story of ambition, obsession, and the price of trying to buy eternity. Behind the beauty of this oceanfront masterpiece lies a family haunted by pressure, scandals, and the slow unraveling of a dynasty. It's the late 19th century. The Vanderbilt family gazes down on the world from their seat of unimaginable wealth. Cornelius Vanderbilt II commissions the Breakers, a stone crown perched on the rugged cliffs of Rhode Island. Every detail exudes power: halls coated in gold leaf, imported marble from Europe, and ballrooms where champagne flowed like rivers. From the outside, it's a fairy tale. Inside, it's a fortress of fear. Fear of losing status, fortune, and legacy. Scandals haunt the newspapers. Workers resent the railroad kings. Children grow up surrounded by luxury, but deprived of normal life. Every room is not just wealth, it's pressure, isolation, and anxiety about the future. Decades pass and the world changes. What began as a private monument to power slowly transforms into a public stage for tourists, selfies, and souvenirs. How did a palace built to immortalize the Vanderbilt name become a quiet testament to a family's decline? And what hidden costs were paid behind its gilded walls? If you love deep dives into Gilded Age architecture and the lives of America's most powerful families, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on which historic mansion we should explore next. Your support keeps these detailed stories alive. Chapter 1: The Night at the Breakers. The transition from invitation to reality is immediate. You walk through the iron gates as the daylight softens, your footsteps echoing on the gravel. The tour group is small, 15, maybe 20 people. Phones are already in hand, cameras raised. The guide leads you toward the entrance, and then you see it.
The facade rises above the manicured lawn. Stone columns, rows of towering windows, all catching the last rays of the sun. This is the Breakers. Not a house, but a statement. 70 rooms built in the late 1890s by Cornelius Vanderbilt II, grandson of the Commodore and heir to what was once the largest railroad fortune in America. The guide's voice is steady, almost musical from repetition. This, she says, was a summer cottage. The word lands strangely. Cottage implies small. This is the opposite of small. Stepping inside, the great hall swallows you whole. Ceilings so high your neck aches from looking up. Marble floors polished to a reflective shine. Columns carved from stone shipped across the Atlantic. Light streams through towering windows, revealing the flat, endless ocean beyond, a band of gray-blue at the edge of everything. The guide moves on, highlighting Italian craftsmen, French designers, materials sourced from a dozen countries. Construction took 2 years, opening in 1895. Then she adds, almost quietly, "This is the second Breakers. The first one burned." The words hang. You glance around at the steel-reinforced beams, fireproof fireplaces, and the careful engineering everywhere. The Vanderbilts weren't building a summer getaway, they were building a fortress against fate itself. The tour continues, rooms filled with roped-off furniture, paintings in heavy frames, and chandeliers frozen mid-glitter overhead. Other visitors murmur, lift their phones, follow the guide from doorway to doorway. But as evening deepens, the house seems to breathe differently. Staff close doors with soft clicks. The ocean sound through the open windows grows louder, steady, and commanding. Maya pauses. She is 32, lives in a small Brooklyn rental, and makes history videos for YouTube. Her parents worked multiple jobs, and she was the first in her family to graduate college. For years, she's filmed places like this: grand houses, ruins, and the whispers of old money. Her videos resonate because viewers are drawn to spaces they'll never own, yet can experience through her lens.
And here, in the Breakers, the story feels alive. Every gilded corner, every polished floor, every echoing hall tells of ambition, pride, and the heavy price of wealth. Behind the opulence, the Vanderbilts' lives were a delicate dance of power and fragility, a lesson in how even the grandest empires can crumble quietly over time. Chapter 2: Building a Stone Dream. Marble costs more than brick. 40 bedrooms seem excessive. And yet, standing in the great hall of the breakers, Maya feels the weight of every choice, every ambition, every layer of history pressed into the walls around her. The last tour group has left. The guide has moved on. A security guard lingers in the doorway, silent, unobtrusive. Light thins through the towering windows, glancing off marble floors and gilded details. Painted clouds stretch across the ceiling, a sky meant to make you forget you are indoors. Maya thinks about the word cottage, about the first breakers burning to ashes and the family's decision to rebuild in stone, to make something that would last forever. She thinks about the people who scrubbed these floors, who hauled stone and set tile. Her older videos never mentioned them. She highlighted architects, Vanderbilts, wealth and design. She showed viewers the gold leaf, the imported marble, the sweeping ocean view. She made it beautiful. That was her job. But now, in the quiet, she feels what was missing, the human effort, the fragility behind the opulence. The house was built to endure, but it did not. The Vanderbilts no longer live here, their fortunes scattered. Their name remains, but the power behind it faded decades ago. What stands now is a museum, a lesson, a monument, a place where strangers pay $20 to wander through someone else's dream, and someone else's downfall.
Maya raises her camera. She films the empty hall, the light softening, the ocean pressing in like a distant heartbeat. She does not narrate yet. She does not know what this video will say, but she knows it will not be about beauty alone. The story of the breakers is darker than postcards suggest, darker than guided tours admit. To understand it, she must go back to the beginning, back to the fire, to the men who laid the stone, to the family that built a palace only to lose it. The security guard clears his throat. Time to leave. Maya nods, pockets her phone, and steps toward the door. Tomorrow, the digging begins. The next morning, Maya sits at her apartment, coffee cooling beside her, laptop open. She scrolls through archives, old newspapers, letters, and historical society databases. Everyone has seen the breakers in color, polished and framed. What she needs is the house before the marble, before the gold, before it became the most expensive summer cottage in America. She finds construction photos from 1893, black and white, edges frayed, dust specks frozen in emulsion. The first image shows an empty lot on Ochre Point Avenue, grass and rocks sloping toward the cliff, the ocean flat and pale beyond. 6 months later, a skeleton emerges, steel beams, stone foundations, scaffolding wrapping the frame like a cage. Tiny workers stand on narrow planks 3 stories above the ground. No helmets, no harnesses, just men, open air, and determination. Cornelius Vanderbilt II does not want to wait. He hires Richard Morris Hunt, America's most sought-after architect, the man behind the base of the Statue of Liberty. Hunt sketches an Italian Renaissance palace, but bigger, grander, not for a Mediterranean prince, but for a railroad magnate intent on immortality. Plans call for limestone from Indiana, marble from Italy and Algeria, granite for foundations fitted so precisely mortar is nearly invisible. This is no local carpentry project. Ships arrive at Newport docks, trains haul stone to the site, and Italian masons, recruited for their expertise in ornamental carving, work through biting New England winters, fingers numb, lungs coated in stone dust.
The timeline is ruthless. 2 years from groundbreaking to completion. Most houses of this scale take 5. Here, delay is unacceptable. Maya clicks through the images, tracing the great hall as it rises, walls assembling, windows locking into place like pieces of a puzzle. The vision is clear, a fortress against time itself, a palace meant to defy fate. And yet, for all the planning, the stones, the artisans, the money, there is an invisible thread weaving through the story: fragility. Ambition cannot guarantee eternity. Power cannot prevent decline. What is built with pride, sweat, and gold can still fall into quiet, empty halls. Maya leans back in her chair. She thinks of the workers, the builders, the families, and the moments that never made it into postcards or guided tours. The story she will tell will honor them all, and not just the grandeur. The Breakers is more than marble and gilding. It is human ambition, audacity, and the delicate, inevitable passage of time. Tomorrow she will begin the next chapter, the people who turned plans into stone, the lives behind the legend, and the truths hidden behind one of America's most extravagant and haunting palaces. Chapter 3: Fire, Panic, and a Second Chance. Maya studies the photographs intently. Workers in caps and suspenders lean against wheelbarrows, their faces blurred by long exposure times, ghost-like, suspended between movements. Alice Vanderbilt, Cornelius's wife, stands in an unfinished doorway, her long dress brushing over sawdust, inspecting the progress with calm, practiced eyes.
One image stops her cold. It shows the rear loggia under construction. The ocean stretches beyond, raw and endless. Columns are not yet in place, only wooden supports hold the roof. In the foreground, a man in a suit, likely Hunt, gestures toward the sea. Beside him, Cornelius Vanderbilt stands shorter than Maya expected, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed not on the horizon, but on the skeletal frame of his home. Along the margin, in faded ink, the caption reads, "Discussing fire safety measures."
Fire safety. The words make Maya lean closer. She opens a new tab, begins searching again. The first Breakers, the wooden mansion that burned, come into focus. Built in the 1870s, large but unremarkable by Newport standards, it vanished overnight. On November 25, 1892, flames erupted in the middle of the night. The family escaped, the staff escaped. By morning, only ashes remained. Newspapers reported the blaze in clipped sentences, flames visible for miles along the coast, roofs collapsing, trees igniting, windows in neighboring houses cracking from the heat. Cornelius reportedly stood on the lawn, silent, watching until nothing was left to see. 3 months later, he bought the land outright and began again. This time, he told Hunt, no wood, no shingles, no decorative timber that could burn. Stone, steel, tile, and plaster. If it could catch fire, it would not be used. The second Breakers would be a fortress, not against armies, but against fire itself. Maya returns to the construction photo, studying Cornelius's intent expression. Did he truly believe stone could outwit disaster? Did he think planning and wealth could erase the memory of watching his first house collapse in flames? She saves the image and begins writing the next part of her script, a meditation on fear disguised as ambition, the story of a man turning anxiety into architecture. The fear was not irrational. Fire in the Gilded Age was a constant threat: wooden houses, gas lighting, coal furnaces, and kitchens burning flames 12 hours a day. Wealthy families lived in structures that could become ovens in minutes. Maya finds a servant's account in the Newport Historical Society, written decades after the fire by Bridget Callahan, Irish-born housemaid at the first Breakers. The account is brief, 3 handwritten pages donated in 1954. Bridget recounts waking to the smell of smoke, not the clean, controlled scent of a fireplace, but sharp, wrong, and urgent. She opens her door on the 3rd floor and sees a haze in the hallway. Other maids are moving quickly, skirts rustling, voices low but deliberate. No screaming yet, just urgent, coordinated action.
Bridget rushes to the children's rooms. Gertrude, Cornelius III, Gladys, and the others are carried down by nurses and staff. She grabs blankets from a linen closet and follows. By the first floor, smoke pours through cracks, racing along the ceilings. The fire originates somewhere below, perhaps the basement or kitchen. The exact source is unknown. It does not matter. The house is going outside on the frozen lawn. The family and staff gather. Cornelius stands near the front, fully dressed despite the hour, coat buttoned tight, silent, controlled, observing everything. He does not cry, he does not panic, he simply watches. The mansion that symbolized their wealth and power is gone, reduced to ash and memory. Maya imagines the scene, the panic, the smell of smoke, the cold air stinging skin, the children shivering in blankets. She feels the weight of human fragility behind the grandeur. Fire had humbled even the richest family in America. And from these ashes, Cornelius resolved to create something stronger, something eternal. The next breakers would rise not merely as a home, but as a monument to control over fate, a palace built with obsession, foresight, and unyielding stone. Yet even as she types, Maya knows the story is not just about triumph or architecture. It is about fear, ambition, and the human compulsion to leave a mark, to outwit disaster, and yet, inevitably, to face it again. Chapter 4. Upstairs, gold. Downstairs, shadows. Alice Vanderbilt holds the youngest children. The older ones stand silent, eyes fixed on the glow. Staff cluster in small groups, some barefoot, some in night cloaks, shivering in the November cold, careful not to look directly at the flames. Bridget Callahan writes, "We stood there and watched it fall. The roof went first, collapsing inward with a sound like thunder, then the walls. The heat was so strong we had to step back."
Cornelius Vanderbilt did not move. He watched the house, his house, consumed by fire. The fire brigade arrived too late. By dawn, only rubble remained. The stone chimneys, blackened and alone, rose from the smoking debris, twisted metal jutting from the ashes. Cornelius did not linger. Maya finds records of his next steps. Within a week, engineers assessed the foundation. Within a month, he sat down with Richard Morris Hunt to plan not a renovation, but a complete rebuild. This time, instructions were brutally clear. No wood. Hunt's early sketches resembled a fortress more than a home. Thick stone walls, steel beams embedded deep in masonry, tile roofs, fireproof plaster, staircases of stone impervious to flame. Even door frames would be metal. The kitchen, relegated to a separate wing, linked by fireproof passages. Every fireplace lined with layers of brick, inspected before use. Fire would not touch this house. The cost of such security was staggering. The second breakers reportedly carried a budget of $7 million in 1890s currency, over $200 million in today's terms. Most of the expense came from materials and speed. Cornelius demanded completion in 2 years. Hundreds of workers were brought in: masons, carpenters, electricians, plasterers, painters. Temporary housing sprouted near the site. Shifts ran from dawn to dark. Pressure hung over every task.
Hunt's designs were meticulous. Every molding had a drawing. Every measurement mattered. Each stone had to fit perfectly. Maya studies a photo from 1894, mid-construction. The house is half-finished. Walls rise, roof partially in place. Scaffolding wraps the structure in ladders and planks. Workers dot every level, hauling stone, guiding blocks into place with ropes. In the foreground, a supervisor gestures with papers in hand toward the rising facade. Behind him, the shell of the future Great Hall stretches upward like a cathedral of bare stone. Maya thinks of Bridget, who returned after the fire to watch this palace rise stone by stone, never needing anyone to explain why it was built this way. The archive file closes. Maya begins drafting the next section of her script. They built it to survive fire, but survival costs more than money. The Breakers opened in the summer of 1895. Invitations went out to Newport's elite, Astors, Belmonts, other Vanderbilts. The great hall gleamed under gaslight. Marble columns soared nearly 30 feet. The ceiling, painted by Italian artists brought over specifically for the project, depicted gods and clouds in colors so vivid they seemed to glow on their own. European furniture filled the rooms, silk curtains, Persian rugs, crystal chandeliers dripping like frozen waterfalls. Guests arrived in carriages and early automobiles, walking through rooms engineered to impress, to overwhelm, to declare the Vanderbilts had not just recovered, they had turned disaster into theater. Yet the house was more than the rooms guests saw. Maya discovers a service map stored alongside the blueprints, revealing the hidden skeleton beneath the elegance. Narrow servant staircases threaded 4 floors without ever cutting through the main halls. Hidden corridors allowed staff to move unseen. The kitchen, sealed in its fireproof wing, connected to the dining room via a tiled tunnel built for trays and footsteps, not eyes.
Every detail was a study in control, beauty above, function below. Upstairs, gold, downstairs, shadows. The mansion was a palace for the elite, a machine for the staff, a fortress against fire, a monument to the anxiety of wealth. Cornelius Vanderbilt had built more than marble and gold. He had built certainty, or at least the illusion of it. Maya leans back from the blueprints. She imagines the workers, the maids, the hidden corners they traversed. She thinks of fire, fear, and ambition turned into architecture. Every glittering chandelier in the great hall, every gilded column is a testament to survival, but at a cost measured not just in dollars, but in human labor, discipline, and relentless pressure. In the quiet of her apartment, Maya begins to write the story of a house that rises from ash, built to awe, engineered to endure, yet always shadowed by what came before. Upstairs, gold dazzles. Downstairs, shadows linger. And through it all, the legacy of fire, ambition, and survival shapes every stone of the Breakers. Chapter 5. A Palace of Grief. Downstairs, in the basement, a small city hums quietly beneath the grandeur. Industrial-sized tubs fill with water for laundry. Long drying racks stretch like scaffolding above. Storage rooms hold coal, meticulously stacked firewood, and every necessity to keep a house this size running. Staff dining areas are plain, walls bare, tables long and utilitarian. Sleeping quarters are cramped, single beds, hooks for clothes, no space for comfort. This is Bridget Callahan's world.
By the mid-1890s, she is in her mid-30s, promoted to head housemaid after years of service. Her days begin at 5 a.m. Fires must be lit in the family's rooms before anyone wakes. Floors swept, dusted, polished, linens changed, chamber pots emptied. Meals served on rigid schedules. Breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 7. Between meals, work never stops. Windows are washed, furniture buffed, silver polished to reflect faces. Carpets are beaten clean in the yard, every hour accounted for. Weekly schedules posted in the staff dining room. Rules posted like law. No visitors in rooms. No fraternizing with male staff. Dismissal for pregnancy. Illness judged improper or failure to obey. Maya finds a staff ledger from 1896, names listed by position: butler, footmen, cooks, scullery maids, laundresses, gardeners, stable hands. Wages noted: head butler, $60 a month, Bridget, $25, scullery maids, $8. Margins carry terse notes: dismissed after illness, November; left service, replaced, December. Most entries list only first names: Mary, Thomas, Bridget. People reduced to roles on paper. Above them, the Vanderbilts live a different life entirely. Alice wakes late, takes breakfast in her room, spends mornings in the library or music room. She walks the cliff path, always accompanied, impeccably dressed. Afternoon tea and conversation segue into evening entertainment. Dinner parties stretch for hours, course after course, wines chosen with precision, servants gliding silently between kitchen and table. Children follow strict routines. Gertrude paints and sculpts in a third-floor studio. Cornelius III studies with private instructors. The youngest play on the lawn, watched, guided, protected by invisible hands.
Two worlds occupy the same house. Maya films a modern tour of the service areas, now open to visitors on rare preservation days. Narrow staircases, bare corridors, cold kitchens restored yet empty. A placard lists hours, wages, and rules, a silent contract between comfort and labor. A guide tells visitors it took approximately 35 full-time staff to run the breakers during the season, more during parties. 35 people to maintain the illusion of effortless elegance. Maya turns the numbers over in her mind. The Vanderbilts spend perhaps 3 months a year here, summer, June through August, occasionally stretching into September. The rest of the year, the house sits mostly empty. Skeleton staff keep it polished, heated, repaired, always ready for the next arrival. She imagines Bridget climbing the steep stairs every morning at 5. Guests in the great hall, champagne in hand, oblivious to the fingers that cleaned their glasses. The tour moves on. Maya lingers in the service corridor, camera rolling. She whispers into the microphone. Luxury is not effortless. Someone is always holding the weight. Yet even above, in gilded halls and marble columns, the human toll of ambition begins to reveal itself. Cornelius Vanderbilt II, the master of this fortress, carries a burden invisible to the guests. Maya discovers medical records in the family archives, digitized PDFs she requested weeks ago, 70 dense pages of notes, test results, correspondence.
In 1896, barely a year after the breakers opened, Cornelius suffers his first stroke. He is 53. The stroke is severe, leaving him able to walk only with effort, his speech slurred, the authority he wielded now shadowed by fragility. The palace, built to survive fire, now houses a man confronting the limits of human endurance. Marble and gold cannot protect against the frailty of the body, nor the weight of expectation. Maya pauses, camera still rolling. She imagines Bridget and her colleagues moving silently through corridors, unaware of the private grief unfolding above them. Upstairs, perfection gleams. Downstairs, shadows endure. And the master of the house, who built walls to resist fire, now faces a vulnerability no stone can contain. The Breakers is more than opulence. It is a study in human ambition, labor, and mortality. Every gilded column, every polished floor, every hidden corridor tells a story of privilege and sacrifice, triumph and fragility. In this palace of grief, Maya understands. Wealth can build wonders, but it cannot shelter against time, disease, or the inevitable cost of carrying the world on one's shoulders. Chapter 6. The Weight of Power. Cornelius Vanderbilt's right hand, the one that signed contracts and shook hands with presidents, trembled so badly he could barely hold a pen. Doctors recommended rest, calm, and reduced stress. Impossible. He was the head of the New York Central Railroad, overseeing the largest transportation network in America, managing investments, properties, staff, and a sprawling web of family obligations. The pressure was relentless. And now, after spending $7 million on a house built to protect him from fire, his own body was collapsing from within.
Alice Vanderbilt stepped in. She took command of the breakers, coordinating with staff, planning events, maintaining the social calendar. The house had to look perfect. This was not vanity, it was survival. Newport society watched closely. A single sign of weakness could be fatal. Families measured, compared, waited for any sign of faltering. If the Vanderbilts stumbled, others would claim their space. So Alice smiled. She hosted dinners while Cornelius recovered upstairs. She walked the cliff path with guests, pointing out the view, commenting on the sea breeze, discussing music and politics, never mentioning her husband's condition unless directly asked. When asked, she would say he was resting, improving, expected to rejoin them soon. He did not improve. In 1899, Cornelius suffered a second stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed. He spent his final months in a wheelchair, moved between rooms by servants, able to watch but not lead, his speech slurred. On September 12, 1899, he died at the breakers, in a bedroom overlooking the ocean he had paid so dearly to claim as a view. He was 55. Maya reads the obituaries. The New York Times gives him a full front-page story. Cornelius Vanderbilt dead. Head of the Vanderbilt family passes away at his summer home. It lists his accomplishments, wealth, railroads, and properties. Mentions his widow and children. No mention of strokes, prolonged illness, or the slow, humiliating decline of a man who once seemed invincible.
But grief was not new to this family. Maya digs deeper. Records reveal earlier losses, common in the 19th century, but devastating nonetheless. Alice gave birth to 7 children. Not all survived. One son, William, died in infancy. Another, Reginald, would struggle with alcoholism and die young. The family tree is littered with names that ended too soon. Whispers of a curse circulated quietly, never official, never written, just murmurs among staff, repeated in society gossip. The sense that the Vanderbilts paid for their wealth in ways money could not fix. Fire, strokes, children lost too early, and relentless pressure that never eased. Bridget, still head housemaid decades later, reportedly told a fellow servant, "This house is beautiful, but it is not happy." Maya notes the line, appearing in a memoir she cannot independently verify. Yet it fits the pattern. A palace on the surface, private losses beneath. After Cornelius died, Alice continued summers at the breakers. She brought the children, hosted events, and kept routines rigid. Stopping would have signaled defeat. Yet the house shifted. It grew quieter. Dinners became smaller, guest lists shorter. The grand spectacles of the 1890s faded. Maya finds a photo from the summer of 1900, the first season after Cornelius's death. Alice stands on the front steps, alone, in black mourning attire. Behind her, the house looms, stone, glass, columns, unchanged by loss. Her expression is flat, hands folded, eyes meeting the camera directly. The caption reads, "Mrs. Cornelius Vanderbilt, I, at her Newport residence." No mention of her husband, no mention of grief, just the title, just the place, as if that alone mattered.
Maya continues scrolling through records. Staff logs from the same year show routines unbroken, fires lit, floors polished, meals served punctually. The house did not slow from mourning. It could not. Every clock tick, every polished surface, every shining silver piece was a testament to the invisible labor sustaining an illusion of perfection. Maya imagines the weight of it all. A man built to dominate railroads and wealth brought low by his own body. A wife carrying not just a household, but the appearance of unbroken power. servants moving silently to maintain the illusion. Upstairs, opulence and control. Downstairs, the human machinery keeping it all in motion. Every glittering chandelier, every column of marble, every polished floor, a reminder that luxury is sustained by sacrifice, by labor, and by the cost no ledger could capture. The Breakers was more than a house. It was a stage, a fortress, a monument to ambition, fear, and endurance. And in its shadows, Maya sees the truth the tourists never notice. Beauty alone cannot protect against loss, grief, or the relentless march of time. Chapter 7. Gilded Summers and Tired Hands. The Breakers demanded constant maintenance, constant work, constant bodies moving up and down stairs. Stopping was never an option. The schedules dictated it. The staff kept going because perfection had no pause. Maya imagines Alice walking through the great hall alone, surrounded by marble and gold, symbols meant to prove something, to secure something, to last forever. Instead, she was a widow at 53, living in a palace that suddenly felt far too large. Maya closes her laptop and gazes out at the Brooklyn skyline. Lights scattered across the dark like a different kind of Gilded Age. She thinks, they built it to survive fire, but they could not build it to survive grief. Every June, the Breakers reopened. Staff arrived weeks in advance, preparing the house with military precision. Dust covers removed, windows washed until they seemed to vanish into sunlight, gardens clipped, pathways swept, fountains polished. By the time the family arrived, the house had to appear as if it had been waiting all year, frozen in perfection, ready for their arrival. Alice continued the tradition into the early 1900s. After Cornelius's death, she returned each summer with her children, now older, some married, some bringing grandchildren. The house filled again, not with the grand, roaring parties of the 1890s, but with family gatherings, smaller dinners, afternoon teas on the loggia overlooking the Atlantic. Newport society continued its quiet but relentless scrutiny. Marble House, Rose Cliff, the Elms, all nearby palaces, each vying for attention. Who had the most celebrated architect, the most extravagant interiors? The guest list whispered about in society columns. The Vanderbilts remained near the top, but maintaining that position required ever more effort each year. Maya finds a household expense ledger from 1905. The numbers stagger. Staff wages alone exceed $15,000 per season. Food and supplies add another $10,000. Maintenance, repairs, coal for heating, gas for lighting push the total by roughly $20,000 more. Insurance, property taxes, groundskeeping layer on top. Altogether, operating the house for 3 summer months costs about $60,000, a sum equivalent to over $2 million today, and that excludes entertaining, wardrobes, travel, and all the invisible expenses required simply to inhabit a mansion and maintain status.
Bridget is still there, now in her late 40s, head housemaid for decades, still climbing the narrow service stairs before dawn. Her hands, according to a younger maid's diary, are stiff with arthritis. 2 decades of scrubbing stone, polishing silver, and tending marble columns have worn her joints down. Still, she works. A position at the Breakers ensures steady pay, and steady pay is rare. A diary entry from a young maid, Catherine Ninite, sketches a typical day in the summer of 1905. Rise at 5. Light fires in the family bedrooms, lay out clothing chosen the night before, prepare wash water and towels, return to the servants' quarters for breakfast around 6, back upstairs by 7 to begin chamber work, emptying chamber pots, making beds, tidying rooms, then dust and sweep the main halls, polish brass fixtures until they gleam, check that fresh flowers are placed in every occupied room. Lunch at noon in the servants' hall. Bread, soup, cold meat, 15 minutes to eat. Afternoon tasks follow.
sorting and mending laundry, preparing guest rooms for later arrivals. Tea service begins at 4, with china, linens, trays, and hot pots carried from the kitchen. Dinner service starts at 7. Staff eat only after the family and guests have finished, sometimes skipping meals entirely if the household schedule demands it. Maya imagines the tired hands, aching muscles, and relentless rhythm of life below stairs, the hidden machinery keeping the palace afloat. Upstairs, gold and marble glimmer. Downstairs, exhaustion and precision sustain it all. Each day is a choreography of labor, discipline, and quiet sacrifice. The Breakers, Maya realizes, was more than a summer home. It was a world built on invisible effort, where luxury depended on unending toil, and appearances mattered as much as reality. It required sacrifice, endurance, and a human cost largely unseen by those who walked its polished floors. And through it all, life continued. Grief, time, and labor intertwined in a house that could dazzle the world while hiding the weight it demanded from those who kept it alive.
Chapter 7. War, Water, and the Family Curse. Life below stairs at the Breakers followed a relentless rhythm. Staff rarely paused, sometimes not until 10 at night. Bedtime came around 11, only to rise again at 5 a.m. One afternoon off per month, no exceptions unless illness intervened. And illness often meant immediate dismissal. Catherine Nanite, a young maid, wrote in her diary, "Bridget told me this is easier than it used to be. I cannot imagine what used to be like." Above stairs, life moved to an entirely different cadence. Alice's daughter, Gertrude, now a young woman, spent summers painting, attending balls, receiving callers, and learning the exacting performance her class demanded. She traveled to Europe during the off-season, later becoming a respected sculptor and philanthropist. Her brother, Cornelius III, immersed himself in the family business, learning the railroads his father once controlled. He married, had children, and brought them to the Breakers each summer, continuing a cycle of generational ritual. On the lawn, the children played the same games, posed for portraits in the same carefully framed photographs. The house looked timeless, and that was the point. Grand architecture, classical lines, stone and marble were designed to outlast every life within. Walk through the Breakers in 1895 or 1910, and the same great hall, staircase, and ocean view greet you. But beneath the surface, strain was recorded in the silent testimony of staff and turnover. Younger workers, often recent immigrants, increasingly chose other paths. Factories offered comparable wages with fewer rules, freedom to leave at the end of a shift, and private rooms for their own lives. They did not have to sleep beneath the employer's roof or wake before sunrise to keep someone else's schedule. Bridget trained new maids constantly. They stayed for a season or two, then moved on. The work was too grueling, the hours too long, the pay too small for the demands placed on their bodies.
Alice noticed the problem. A household of this scale runs smoothly only when staff know their roles instinctively. But workers who knew those roles were growing harder to replace. Maya films the servant quarters on a modern preservation tour. The rooms are small, just enough space for a narrow bed and a chair. Some lack windows entirely. Hallways are tight, unadorned, painted a practical white. The contrast with builded ceilings and polished marble upstairs is stark. Visitors fall silent when stepping through the doorway. The guide tells the group, service was considered an honor, but it was also exhausting. Maya imagines Bridget's swollen, aching hands still clutching polishing cloths at 48. She recalls Catherine's diary, 15-minute lunch, 5 a.m. wake-up repeated summer after summer. Maya reflects on that word, honor, and who truly paid the price for it. Then, the world changed. In 1914, war erupted in Europe. At first, it seemed distant, a problem for other nations, other families. The Vanderbilts maintained their summer traditions. Guests arrived, dinners took place, the routines endured. Yet the war edged closer. In 1915, the RMS Lusitania was torpedoed off Ireland. The ship sank in 18 minutes, nearly 1,200 lives lost. Among them, Alfred Vanderbilt, Cornelius's younger brother, one of the wealthiest men in America, just 37. Survivors described him giving his life jacket to a young mother, remaining on deck as the vessel went down. Newspapers hailed him a hero. The family received the truth. He was gone.
Alice learned the news at the breakers. Maya uncovers a letter she wrote shortly afterward, archived and later donated. Her handwriting is steady, controlled. "We have endured much, but this feels different. The ocean, which we have always loved, has taken someone dear. The sea outside the breakers, once a perfect backdrop, now carries a different weight." The staff noticed the change. Catherine recorded in her diary that Alice no longer walked the cliff path alone. She avoided the loggia where morning tea was once taken. The ocean, once a scenic ornament to the house, now felt like a threat, a reminder of fragile life and loss. Maya envisions the tension inside the breakers. Upstairs, grief and tradition intertwining. Downstairs, staff maintaining routines under unspoken pressure. The house itself, massive and gleaming, unchanged yet shadowed by tragedy. Luxury demanded labor, but it could not protect against fate. Marble, gold, and sweeping views could impress the world, but they could not shield hearts from grief or family tragedy. In this way, the breakers continued its dual existence, a palace of opulence and performance above stairs, and a realm of exhaustion, discipline, and quiet endurance below. Every step, every gesture, every polished surface told the story of a household bound by duty, tradition, and the inexorable march of time, unbroken externally, but forever marked by loss within. Chapter 8. Whispers, War, and the Shrinking Household. The whispers about a curse grew louder, never openly, never in front of the family, but in the servants' quarters and quiet corridors after the household went to bed, the idea circulated. Fire, Cornelius's strokes, the children who died young, and now Alfred lost at sea, formed a pattern in the minds of those who had served the Vanderbilts for years. Coincidence became something else. Catherine Ninette recorded in her diary, "Bridget says the house is unlucky. Stone cannot protect you from fate. I do not know if I believe in curses, but I know this family has suffered."
Then the war reached America in 1917. Young men enlisted or were drafted. Footmen, gardeners, and stable hands left for military service, some never returning. Catherine's diary ends abruptly that May. Her last entry mentions her brother joining the army. After that, silence. Did she leave service, move away, or simply stop writing? The records do not say. The house carried on with fewer people. Rooms once polished daily were now dusted weekly. Some guest bedrooms remained closed for entire seasons. Furniture lay draped under sheets, shutters drawn. The breakers, once a gleaming summer palace, began to feel more like a vast, strange shell trying to maintain an idea of itself. Alice Vanderbilt was now in her 70s. She still summered in Newport, but her stays grew shorter. The social calendar thinned, the elaborate dinners and grand balls less frequent. Other families faced similar pressures. Sons and nephews were overseas. Servants were scarce. The glittering, orchestrated spectacles that had defined the Gilded Age were slowly dissolving under the weight of modern warfare. Maya examines photographs from 1918, the final year of the conflict. One shows the great hall, empty, sunlight slanting through tall windows onto slightly dusty floors. No guests, no music, no footsteps, just the space, the light, and a quiet absence. Another image captures the front lawn, grass grown a little too long, hedges neatly trimmed but no longer razor-sharp.
Standards had slipped, not dramatically, but enough that anyone who remembered the height of perfection would notice. The war ended in November 1918, but the world that returned was not the world that had built the breakers. The social structures, the certainty that wealth and lineage were permanent, the quiet belief that fortunes could guard against loss, all of it was crumbling.
The numbers began to fail after the war. Maya pulls up estate records from the 1920s, now accessible through historical archives. The cost of running the breakers had escalated, wages rising, taxes increasing, and a shrinking pool of domestic workers challenging the illusion of effortless elegance. Unions were forming, labor expectations shifted. The rhythm of life below stairs no longer mirrored the precision above. The breakers, once a fortress of wealth and certainty, now strained under social, economic, and historical pressures it had never faced before. The house remained, grand and immovable, yet the world that gave it meaning had changed forever. Marble and gold could not protect against war, death, or the passage of time. Chapter 9. Taxes, Choices, and the Weight of Legacy. The breakers remained a marvel of design, yet the numbers behind its upkeep told a different story. Maintenance, staff, utilities, and taxes, these costs remained almost unchanged, but the income once sufficient to cover them was shrinking. In 1916, the federal government introduced a new estate tax. Wealth passed from one generation to the next would now be taxed. For the largest fortunes, rates started around 10% and climbed sharply. By the 1920s, the top rate reached roughly 40%. 40% of an estate gone before heirs even touched a single dollar. The Vanderbilt fortune, already divided among Cornelius's children after his death, fragmented further with each new generation. What had been a single immense concentration of wealth in the Commodore's hands in the 1870s was now split among dozens of descendants, each inheritance smaller than the last, each new heir facing higher taxes on what remained. Operating the breakers now exceeded what many heirs could realistically afford. Alice Vanderbilt still owned the house. Now in her 80s, her time in Newport shrank. Some summers she arrived in July and departed by mid-August, 6 weeks instead of the traditional 3 months. For the rest of the year, a skeleton staff kept the house from falling into decay. Even a skeleton crew, however, cost money, and finding reliable staff was more difficult than ever. The war had shifted expectations. Young people who might have entered domestic service before 1914 now had options. Factories were hiring, offices needed clerks and typists, shops demanded salespeople. Unions were forming in mills and plants, advocating for higher wages and shorter hours. The pay in these roles often matched what a servant earned, but the conditions were radically different. Work 8 hours, then go home. Sundays off. A life that belonged to you, not dictated by the strict rules of a household you could never leave. Bridget's niece, Ellen, chose a textile factory in Fall River over a position at the breakers. Catherine's diary had mentioned her once, noting her sharpness and promise as a domestic worker. But Ellen had other plans. In a 1970s oral history interview, she explained her decision matter-of-factly. "I could have gone to Newport like my aunt. Good family, steady work, but I wanted my own life. At the factory, I finished at 5. The time was mine. I could go to the cinema, meet friends. I was not polishing someone else's silver until midnight." The staff dining room at the breakers, once lively and crowded, now held empty chairs. Positions went unfilled. Work fell onto fewer shoulders. One person performing the duties of 2, sometimes 3. Standards slipped again. Rooms were cleaned less often, minor repairs went unattended. The house, designed to be flawless, began to show subtle cracks. Paint peeled in service corridors, wallpaper loosened, fine lines spidered through plaster, invisible to a casual guest in the Great Hall, but unmistakable to anyone who lived and worked in the back hallways.
Alice noticed. Estate records show attempts to trim costs. Staff wages were adjusted on paper, but rarely increased in reality. Some roles disappeared entirely. The head gardener's position was reduced to part-time. Laundry was outsourced rather than processed in the house's enormous tubs. Each change minor in isolation, but collectively they reflected a household struggling to sustain itself. Other Newport families faced the same financial reality. Some sold their estates outright. Marble House was leased to another family. Rosecliff changed hands. The Elms was sold after its original owner passed. Houses that had once defined the Gilded Age, palaces of marble, gold, and impossibly high ceilings, were now too costly to maintain. The breakers remained with the Vanderbilts, but the strain was written in ledgers, letters, and careful accounts. Maya finds a letter from Alice to her daughter Gertrude, dated 1925. The words reveal duty, not desire. The house is too large for the use we make of it, yet I cannot bring myself to part with it. Your father built it to last, and I feel I owe it to his memory to see that it does. Obligation, not joy. The breakers had become a monument, a promise carved in stone. Letting it go would feel like betrayal. The house was no longer merely a home. It was a weight, an inheritance, a responsibility, a physical embodiment of a family's history and grief. Marble and limestone, gold and crystal, they could not stop time, they could not prevent loss, but they could hold a memory.
And Alice, like many before her, bore that memory quietly, knowing the house itself demanded as much as it had ever offered. The breakers, once a symbol of unyielding wealth and ambition, now stood as a reminder. The illusion of permanence is fragile. Fortunes fracture. Staff leave. Loved ones die. The world moves forward, indifferent to the palaces built to impress it. Stone and marble endure, but they cannot hold back the tides of change. Gertrude, now a respected sculptor and philanthropist, purportedly suggested transforming part of the breakers into an art gallery or museum, opening the estate at least partially to the public. Alice refused. The breakers was a private home. It would remain a private home. But the question lingered. What do you do with a palace when you can no longer afford it, yet cannot bear to let it go? Maya stands outside the breakers during her research trip. Tourists drift past, phones raised, capturing quick snapshots before moving on to the next attraction. She imagines Alice in the 1920s walking these same halls, feeling the relentless pressure of a house that had outgrown its purpose. The stone remains unyielding, the structure still sound, but the world it was built for has vanished, and the family clinging to it is running out of options. Chapter 9. From Private Palace to Public Tour. Alice Vanderbilt died in 1934 at 89. She had outlived her husband by 35 years, several of her children, and a world she had once navigated with grace and precision. The breakers, built to impress and intimidate, now passed to her youngest daughter, Gladys, Countess Széchenyi. Gladys spent most of her life in Europe, leaving her with a palace she rarely occupied. The Great Depression, now in its 5th year, had crushed fortunes and drained banks. Unemployment hovered around 25%, and wealth that had once seemed eternal evaporated almost overnight. The Vanderbilt fortune, already diminished by taxes and inheritance splits, contracted further. Maintaining the breakers shifted from difficult to nearly impossible. Operating costs remained high. Roofs leaked, stone joints needed repointing, and the Atlantic's salt air chewed at metals and warped wood. Even a house built to resist fire could not escape the slow, relentless decay of time. Repairs could not wait. Gladys faced an impossible decision: sell the house, demolish it, subdivide the property, convert it into apartments, or find a new model to preserve it. Around her, other estates were disappearing. During the 1930s and 1940s, Newport watched mansion after mansion vanish. In many cases, the land was more valuable than the buildings. Developers leveled these great homes, replacing them with smaller houses or apartment blocks. The era of the private palace was collapsing under taxes, maintenance costs, and shifting tastes. The breakers survived because of compromise. In 1948, Gladys leased the house to the Preservation Society of Newport County for a symbolic $1 per year. Under the agreement, the society would open the first and second floors to the public as a museum, taking responsibility for maintenance, repairs, and staffing. In return, Gladys and her family retained private use of the third floor during the summer. Maya finds the original lease agreement scanned and digitized. The language is formal but clear. The society assumes responsibility for the public areas, while the family keeps its private quarters. Ticket revenue funds upkeep and restoration. No one gets rich, but both sides preserve the estate. On July 31, 1948, the breakers opened to the public for the first time. Tickets were $1. Lines formed outside the gates. Teachers, factory workers, nurses, and shopkeepers, people who would never have been invited during the Gilded Age, walked up the drive, paid their $1, and stepped into the Great Hall. Maya discovers a newspaper article from opening day. The reporter describes crowds moving beneath the painted ceiling, heads tilted back, hands brushing marble columns as if to check they were real. One schoolteacher from Providence is quoted, "I never thought I would see the inside of a place like this. It is like stepping into a history book."
Not everyone saw only magic. Some former staff, now elderly, returned for the opening. A few were hired as guides, narrating the rooms they had once cleaned. For them, it was a mixture of pride, nostalgia, and memory, a chance to revisit the lives they had lived in service of a house designed to awe. Maya watches tourists move through the space, capturing selfies and quick videos, yet she thinks about those who came before them, about Alice walking silently through the halls, maintaining appearances under the weight of grief, about Gladys negotiating survival for her family's legacy, about staff members whose sweat and labor preserved the illusion of perfection for decades. The breakers had changed. It was no longer merely a private palace, but a bridge between eras, an artifact of ambition, wealth, and loss, now accessible to the public. The walls still speak of marble and gold, of ocean views and ceilings painted with clouds, but they also whisper the deeper story of the family who built it, the lives it touched, the sacrifices behind every polished surface. The estate that once symbolized private power had transformed into a shared history, a museum that allows the public to step inside, to witness both grandeur and vulnerability, to understand that even a palace built to last cannot stop the passage of time, but it can preserve memory. Some visitors came not to admire, but to remember. They returned as guests, not as workers slipping through back stairs. Ellen, Bridget's niece, attended the opening day of the breakers. In a later oral history interview, she recalls walking through the servants' quarters, now included on special tours.
"I stood in the room my aunt had lived in for 27 years. It was tiny, cold. The tour guide explained the work we did, and people seemed surprised. I was not. The house had become a story about itself, not just the Vanderbilts and their parties, nor just an architectural lesson. The narrative now had to include the whole structure: wealth and labor, beauty and cost, the rooms upstairs and the narrow corridors below. Attendance climbed steadily. By the 1950s, tens of thousands passed through annually. Ticket prices rose gradually from $1 to $2, then $5. The revenue covered routine maintenance and began funding deeper restorations. Rooms long shuttered were reopened, painstakingly returned to their original appearance. Gladys continued using the third floor during summers until her death in 1965. Afterward, the entire house transitioned fully into museum use. The private apartment closed, marking the end of any direct Vanderbilt claim to the breakers as a residence. Maya films the modern Welcome Center, built in the early 2000s to accommodate the growing crowds. Low and unobtrusive, it sits off the main house. Visitors buy tickets, locate restrooms, grab water, and then ascend the long approach to the mansion. When the project was first proposed, some Vanderbilt descendants objected. One told a local paper, "It looks like a visitor center at a state park, not an entrance to a family home." But the Breakers was no longer simply a family home. It had become a monument, a lesson, a living history, a set of rooms transformed into questions about how a nation once treated money, labor, and status. Hundreds of thousands now came each year, not to be seen, but to see, to witness an era that built houses it could not sustain. Maya keeps circling back to one thought. The Vanderbilts built it. The public saved it.
Chapter 10: The Welcome Center War. The public had saved the Breakers, but not everyone agreed on how. Maya sifts through records from early 2000s public meetings when the Preservation Society proposed constructing a new Welcome Center. The existing infrastructure was overwhelmed. Long lines exposed visitors to sun and rain. Restrooms were scarce, there was nowhere to buy water, and seating was non-existent. Over 400,000 annual visitors strained the grounds and threatened the preservation of the mansion itself. The proposed solution was simple on paper: a modern building set back from the house, integrated discreetly into the landscape, containing ticketing, restrooms, a small cafe, and educational displays. The backlash was immediate. Some descendants, though no longer living in the house, spoke out publicly. Letters flooded the Newport Daily News. One great-great-grandchild of Cornelius called the Welcome Center a commercial intrusion on sacred ground. Another warned it was turning a family legacy into a theme park. Community meetings became tense. Preservation Society staff argued that without modern amenities, the Breakers could not remain open. Visitor numbers would drop, revenue would shrink, and maintenance could falter. Their position was clear. The choice was not between a welcome center and no welcome center. It was between a welcome center and slow decline. Opponents countered that the estate itself was the artifact. Any modern addition, they argued, risked compromising its integrity. They cited other historic houses that managed without large visitor centers. Did 400,000 visitors a year really need access, or would smaller, controlled tours better serve preservation? Beneath zoning debates and design sketches, the real conflict was one of ownership. Who did the Breakers belong to now? Was it still, in some moral sense, a Vanderbilt legacy that should remain untouched, even if that limited access? Or had it become a public resource, held in trust for everyone now paying to preserve it, and therefore adaptable to contemporary needs?
Maya pores over op-eds, letters to the editor, and planning commission transcripts. The tone is sharp, personal, sometimes biting. One preservationist writes, "The Vanderbilts are gone. The house remains because we chose to save it. We have earned the right to make it work for the present, not just the past." A descendant fires back, "My family built this house. Your ticket price does not erase that." Ultimately, compromise won. The Welcome Center was built, low, respectful, functional, balancing visitor needs with the historic estate's dignity. The Breakers had survived centuries of fire, strokes, economic pressures, wars, and changing social norms. It now endured a new era, the age of public stewardship, where preservation required adaptation. The story of the Breakers, Maya realizes, is not just one of opulence and architecture. It is a story of labor and ambition, loss and memory,
private lives and public responsibility. It is a house that could not escape time, but one that continues to teach, challenge, and inspire everyone who walks through its doors. Respect costs nothing. The Preservation Society pressed forward. Environmental and visual impact studies were commissioned, and architects revised their plans repeatedly to address concerns. The final design positioned the Welcome Center roughly 300 feet from the breakers, partially sunk into the ground, with a green roof to blend seamlessly into the landscape. Native plantings screened it from view, ensuring the mansion remained the focus. The building itself was intentionally unadorned. No Gilded Age flourishes, just clean, contemporary lines.
Construction began in 2006. Protests continued. A small group of descendants and supporters stood outside the gates with signs, "Preserve, don't commercialize." Local television covered the story, and national outlets followed. For a brief period, the breakers returned to headlines, not for marble or parties, but for a dispute over restrooms and a cafe. The Welcome Center finally opened in 2009. Maya visits during her research trip. From the mansion, it is nearly invisible. Inside, it is bright, functional, and busy. Families buy tickets at the counters, children dash to the restrooms, and elderly visitors rest on benches. A small cafe offers coffee, sandwiches, and water. Along one wall, panels explain the history of the breakers, the Gilded Age, and the lives of those who built and maintained the estate. She observes a school group gathering near the exit doors. The teacher reminds them to stay together and pay attention. The children buzz with curiosity. One asks if they will see the bedrooms. Another quietly asks if the house is haunted. The guide smiles and leads them toward the mansion, weaving history with storytelling. Maya reflects on the decades of meetings, letters, and debates, accusations of turning the house into a theme park, warnings about violating sacred ground. She wonders if the loudest opponents ever visit now. If they do, would they see what the building truly accomplishes? Without these restrooms, shade, and small conveniences, fewer visitors would come. Without visitors, ticket revenue would shrink. Without revenue, the stone giant on the Atlantic cliff would slowly deteriorate. The math is simple. The emotions surrounding it are far more complicated.
She films the constant flow of visitors, families with strollers, retirees with cameras, teenagers taking selfies on the lawn. Some are deeply engaged, reading every plaque. Others merely pause for a photo. All pay to step through the threshold, and all, subtly, almost unknowingly, inherit a fragment of the legacy the Vanderbilts could not preserve on their own. Later, recording a voiceover in her apartment, Maya reflects on the paradox. The family fought to keep the house private. The public fought to keep it open. Both groups believed they were protecting the breakers. Perhaps, in different ways, they were both right. She packs her camera and heads toward the mansion for one final tour, already contemplating the closing chapters of her work, the part where all threads converge, where history, labor, wealth, and preservation intersect. Chapter 11. Voices in the Archive. The tour ends, but Maya's research continues. She requests access to the Preservation Society's research library, housed in a quiet building just blocks from the estate. Patricia, the archivist, a woman in her early 60s, guides her into a climate-controlled room lined with gray boxes and metal filing cabinets. The air carries the faint scent of paper and dust, a smell that promises stories, secrets, and decades of careful preservation. Here, among the archives, Maya begins to piece together the deeper narrative. The lives of the workers who polished every surface, the family who built the house to outlast time, the public who fought to keep it alive, and the fragile human drama embedded in every marble column and painted ceiling. Every document, photograph, and ledger adds a voice to the story, a chorus spanning generations. Maya leans forward, scanning a row of boxes labeled meticulously in Patricia's careful hand. Each one holds fragments of lives long past, reminders of the labor, ambition,
loss, and memory that shaped the breakers. In this quiet room, the mansion's story extends beyond its walls, beyond the cliffs, beyond the grand facade. Here is the weight of history, waiting to be understood, preserved, and told. "What are you looking for?" Patricia asks. Maya hesitates. "The people no one remembers," she replies. Patricia nods knowingly, as if she has heard this answer before. She pulls 3 boxes from a shelf. Inside are letters, photographs, and employment records, some fragile, yellowed at the edges, others photocopies of documents held in distant collections. Patricia explains that the Preservation Society has been gathering staff histories for decades, interviewing descendants, and copying anything that survived in attics and family trunks. Maya opens the first box. On top lies a letter dated 1897, written in careful, slanting script. The author, Mary Donahue, introduces herself as a scullery maid, writing to her sister in Ireland. She describes her first months at the breakers. "The work is harder than I expected, but the pay is steady. I wake before the sun and do not stop until after dark. My hands are red and raw from washing, but I am told they will toughen. The house is beautiful, though I see only the parts where we work. The family passes sometimes, but they do not speak to us. We are like the furniture, necessary but invisible."
Necessary but invisible. Underlined. Beneath Mary's letter lies another from 1930, written by a footman named Thomas to his brother in Boston. Quote, "Mrs. Vanderbilt is fair, though distant. The butler is strict. We are not permitted to speak unless spoken to when upstairs. Yesterday I was reprimanded for making eye contact with a guest. I do not understand these rules, but I follow them. The alternative is dismissal, and I have nowhere else to go." End quote. The letters continue, some recounting small kindnesses, a Christmas bonus, a rare afternoon off, a word of sympathy from Alice during illness. Others chronicle the harshness of the work, wages docked for minor mistakes, sudden dismissals, exhaustion so deep that sleep feels like a brief pause between shifts. The second box holds a photograph dated around 1910. It shows the staff gathered on the front lawn, 37 people in total. The butler and housekeeper stand at the center, housemaids in the back row, footmen and gardeners in the middle, kitchen staff to one side. Everyone wears uniforms. No one smiles. Patricia leans over Maya's shoulder. "That's one of the only group photos we have. Staff photographs were rare. Families didn't think to document them." Maya studies each face. Bridget is there, third from the left in the back row, shoulders straight, hands folded, eyes focused somewhere beyond the camera. Beside her stands a younger woman, possibly Catherine. The grainy image makes it hard to be certain. The third box contains legal documents, contracts, payroll ledgers, termination notices. The language is cold and clipped. Dismissed for unsatisfactory performance. Left service without notice. Wages reduced due to breakage. Lives are flattened into a few lines of ink. Maya scans a ledger from 1920 and finds Bridget's entry near the top. B. Callahan, head housemaid, $30 per month. Below are a dozen more names, most earning $8 to $20 monthly. She calculates in the margin. $30 in 1920 is roughly $450 today for 6-day weeks, 15-hour days.
Patricia watches quietly. "The numbers shock people," she says. "But domestic service was considered respectable. Steady work with housing and meals. Many alternatives paid less or offered no security." Maya nods, but the weight of it lingers. She thinks of Ellen choosing a textile factory for her own time, of Mary's raw hands, of Thomas terrified to look a guest in the eye, of Bridget's tired gaze in that lawn photograph. Upstairs, the house gleams with gold and marble. Down here, in these cardboard boxes, the cost of that shine is written in faded ink and careful handwriting.
Maya closes the third box and thanks Patricia. Outside, the afternoon light feels almost too bright after the dim archive. She has what she came for: the voices, the names, the wages, the rules, the pieces that turn a palace back into a workplace. The story of the breakers is not only the Vanderbilts, it is everyone who made the illusion function, those who polished marble, lit fires, carried trays, and slipped out of sight because no one thought they mattered, until now. Chapter 12. Preservation in Progress. The next morning, Maya returns to the breakers for a very different kind of tour. The Preservation Society offers specialized access for researchers and filmmakers, and Patricia has arranged it. A conservator named David meets Maya at a side entrance, away from the crowds. He wears work clothes, carries a clipboard, and moves with the ease of someone who knows every inch of the building. "We'll start on the third floor," he says. "That's where most of the active work happens." They climb a narrow service staircase, not the grand main stairs that the tours use. The walls here are plain, no gilding, no wallpaper, just plaster, punctuated by pencil marks left decades ago by workers long gone. The third floor is a revelation. Rooms stand empty. Furniture has been removed. Scaffolding fills hallways. Drop cloths cover the floors. Conservators work quietly, methodically. One kneels beside a wall, lifting layers of old wallpaper with tweezers. Another photographs damage to a ceiling medallion, noting measurements on a tablet. David explains, "The public sees the finished rooms, reconstructed to resemble 1895. Up here, we see everything else: the repairs, the compromises, the daily choices about what to save and what we can't." They stop at a stripped bedroom. Bare walls display a grid of paint swatches, each labeled with pigments, dates, and sources. "We're repainting this room based on archival research," David says. "We found photographs, paint samples, even invoices from the original decorators. But the exact shade is still an educated guess. Light changes it, paint fades. We test formulas until one feels closest to the original." Maya films as he speaks and asks how they know when to stop testing. "Authenticity is key," David says, "but so is durability. Modern paints last longer and handle humidity better. We use period-appropriate colors with contemporary materials. Visitors don't notice the chemistry, but the house does." They move to another room where part of the ceiling has been removed, exposing dark wooden beams beneath. David points to deep stains. "Water damage," he says, "probably from the 1950s or 60s when the house sat mostly empty. The roof leaked and repairs were delayed. By the time the Preservation Society took control, some damage had already occurred. We repair what we can and document the rest." The work is slow, precise, and expensive. David pulls up a budget projection on his tablet. The breakers needs roughly $3 million annually just for basic maintenance and conservation. That doesn't include major projects like the roof replacement completed in 2015, which cost an additional $5 million. Ticket revenue covers most of the ongoing costs. Donations and grants fill the gaps. Without public access, David emphasizes, this house would not survive. The math is blunt. The grandest stone palace on the Atlantic relies on hundreds of thousands of visitors to keep its walls standing. They descend to the second floor, following a narrow staff corridor. Suddenly, the space opens into one of the grand bedrooms. The transition is striking. On one side, plain plaster walls and scuffed floors. On the other, gilded surfaces, heavy drapes, and ornate furnishings. David pauses in the doorway, letting the contrast speak. "Every room tells two stories," he says. "The public sees one, the grandeur, the luxury, the image the Vanderbilts built. Up here, we see another, the labor, the repairs, the daily effort that keeps the illusion alive. Both are essential to understanding this house." Maya films, thinking about the centuries of care, the generations of workers who polished, scrubbed, and preserved these rooms. The Breakers is more than marble and gold. It is a living testament, not just to wealth and ambition, but to preservation, dedication, and the quiet labor that history often overlooks. As they continue down the corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoes against plaster and wood. In that moment, the house is both past and present, a fragile monument held together by care, money, and a relentless devotion to memory. "This is what the house has always been," David says, pausing in the corridor. "Two worlds side by side. We preserve both now, not only the marble and gold, but the service stairs, the plain halls, the infrastructure that made the splendor work."
Maya asks if this has always been the approach. He shakes his head. No. Early restorations focused almost entirely on the showpiece rooms, the public spaces. Over time, we realized that left half the story untold. Now, servant spaces are included on tours. We talk about wages, working conditions, and the people who lived here and were never meant to be seen. He leads her into a small exhibit installed in the former housekeeper's office. Enlarged staff photographs line the walls alongside copied employment records. A recreated housemaid's uniform stands on a mannequin. A placard breaks down daily routines, pay scales, and the reality of domestic service during the Gilded Age. Visitors drift through, reading quietly. Some photograph the uniform. Others glance at the text and move on, uncomfortable or disinterested. "Not everyone wants this part," David says softly. "They come for the fairy tale. We give them history instead. That can be a harder sell." Maya thanks him and steps back into the corridor. She films the hallway, the pivot where plain plaster gives way to ornament, the thin border between beauty and the labor that maintained it. She thinks about the conservators upstairs, working in stripped rooms, making meticulous decisions about paint, plaster, and what counts as original. David's words echo. Preservation is not freezing time, but choosing what the present decides to inherit. The house is not a ruin, it is alive, but it needs constant care, constant funding, constant attention from people whose names will never be as famous as Vanderbilt and may never be remembered, just as Bridget's never were. The difference now, Maya thinks, is that at least their work is acknowledged. Now the full story is told. She walks back toward the great hall, camera recording, already considering the final chapters and how to weave all these threads together. Chapter 13. The Mansion as a Mirror.
The cliff walk runs along the eastern edge of the property. It predates the Breakers, predates the Vanderbilts entirely. A public right-of-way established in colonial times, it survives despite centuries of private development. From here, the house is revealed in full. Stone facade, ocean backdrop, scale that photographs never quite capture. Thousands pause daily. Tourists raise phones, snap a few shots, and move on. Few linger. The house reveals different truths depending on the viewer. For some, it is achievement, proof that ambition and capital can build permanence. The Vanderbilts rose from near nothing. The Commodore started as a ferry operator and within 2 generations built a monumental legacy. That story fits a familiar vision of American possibility. For others, the Breakers represents exploitation. 70 rooms maintained by roughly 35 staff members earning between $8 and $60 per month. Luxury built on labor, on exhaustion. That interpretation is just as grounded. Contemporary accounts show both perspectives. Society pages detailed dinners, balls, and fashions. The house was a triumph of taste, wealth, and power. But labor newspapers were scathing. Union organizers contrasted Vanderbilt's wealth with the wages of domestic staff and railroad workers. Editorials questioned whether such concentrations of wealth served the public at all. The debate never truly ended. Modern visitor responses continue the conversation. Comment cards, online reviews, and social media posts show a persistent divide. Some describe the breakers as inspiring, a work of art worth preserving at any cost. Others call it disturbing, a monument to inequality.
The Preservation Society has adapted its narrative over decades. Tours beginning in 1948 emphasized family life and architecture. Servants appeared, if at all, as background. By the 1980s, labor history gained attention in universities, and museums began centering previously marginalized voices. The breakers opened more servant spaces, began naming workers, and presented their stories alongside the families. Today, guides balance both, grandeur and labor, corridors and ballrooms, wage charts and tapestries. Even the gift shop reflects this balance. Books on Gilded Age architecture sit beside those on labor history. Whether this satisfies all visitors is another question. Some want the fairy tale, beauty, a short escape, imagining life among the Vanderbilts. Talks of exploitation feel like lights turning on at the end of the movie. Others arrive skeptical, demanding accountability, wanting the human cost acknowledged. Ignoring it feels dishonest, even offensive. The house itself does not resolve this tension. Marble, stone, glass, they remain unchanged. The Great Hall impresses whether viewed as art or excess. Service stairs remain narrow and steep, regardless of acknowledgement. What changes is context. A visitor in 1895 likely saw the breakers as expected, large houses, plenty of staff. Questioning it would have been strange. A visitor in 2025 sees wealth inequality, labor rights, historical responsibility. The same building prompts different questions. The Preservation Society's archives record this evolution. 75 years of visitor comments show recurring patterns. Curiosity about the Vanderbilts' happiness. Were they happy appears repeatedly in cards, reviews, tours. The assumption seems to be that wealth this visible must produce either extraordinary joy or profound misery.
History, however, is rarely so dramatic. Cornelius died at 55. Alice spent decades as a widow. Children married, moved across continents, experienced different fortunes. Money thinned with each generation. Happiness, in this context, is not a historical question. It is philosophical. What history can say with confidence is this: the Breakers is more than a house. It is a mirror reflecting ambition, labor, wealth, and human experience across generations. It tells a story of achievement and cost, of splendor and sacrifice. Marble and labor, opulence and obligation, beauty and burden, all coexist, inseparable, demanding we consider the past in all its complexity. Maya films the house from the cliff path, the sunlight glinting on windows, waves crashing behind. She sees not just a mansion, but a layered history, a dialogue between wealth and labor, private ambition and public responsibility. The Breakers endures because both its builders and those who preserved it demanded that every story, visible or hidden, be remembered. The Breakers cost roughly $7 million to build. It required around 35 full-time staff to operate during the summer season, which lasted about 3 months each year. Yet, despite the fortune invested in its construction and maintenance, the estate remained in family hands for barely 50 years before financial and social pressures forced the Vanderbilts to lease it to a preservation organization. The house endured. The fortune did not. That contrast alone speaks volumes about permanence, about what money can buy, what it cannot protect, and the difference between creating something spectacular and sustaining it. The sun arcs across the sky. Visitors continue arriving, walking the paths, snapping photographs. The Atlantic crashes against the rocks beneath the cliff walk. The Breakers stands steadfast, as it has for more than a century. waiting for each new wave of observers to decide what it means. History does not offer answers, it offers evidence. And what people make of that evidence depends on what they bring with them as they step through the gate.
Its title is concise and direct: The Breakers, the Dark Cost of America's Most Expensive Mansion. The thumbnail captures the great hall at dusk, slanting light illuminating marble and wood, striking but never sensationalized. The immediate response is swift. Within the first hour, views surpass 10,000. The platform's algorithm detects engagement. Average watch time exceeds 20 minutes, signaling that most viewers are watching nearly to the end. By midnight, views exceed 50,000. By morning, 200,000. Comments accumulate rapidly, spanning a wide spectrum. Educators are among the first to respond. High school and college history teachers flag the video for classroom use. Many note that its balance between architecture and labor history fills gaps in materials typically available. One educator writes, "Most resources either glorify or condemn. This does neither. It documents descendants of domestic workers and incorporates family stories." Several viewers share personal connections. One recognizes a relative in an archival photograph. Another describes discovering employment records in family papers after watching. Historians weigh in as well. Some praise the depth of research and clear sourcing. Others note minor inaccuracies or simplifications necessary for a general audience. Overall, professional feedback is positive, with academics sharing the video across networks. Preservation professionals respond publicly. Conservators and museum staff from other historic estates comment on the familiar challenge of telling complicated stories to visitors who expect simplicity. One curator at a comparable property reflects on balancing accessibility with historical accuracy, describing struggles nearly identical to those faced by the Breakers team.
Criticism arrives too. Some viewers object to the emphasis on labor and inequality, insisting architectural and artistic achievements deserve celebration regardless of the human cost. They argue that judging Gilded Age families by modern moral standards is unfair and anachronistic. Others take the opposite stance, contending that preserving these mansions inevitably softens or excuses historical inequality. Some suggest demolition would have been preferable. Political readings appear quickly. Certain commenters frame the video as a platform for contemporary wealth or labor policy, while others insist it remains strictly historical storytelling. The Preservation Society of Newport County posts a brief statement on social media, acknowledging the video and praising the careful research and balanced narrative. They note a measurable uptick in ticket inquiries in the days following release. Within 2 weeks, views surpass 1 million. Traffic to the Breakers website rises significantly, and tour bookings increase, particularly for the specialized tours highlighting servant spaces. Academic interest grows. Graduate students researching public history and digital media contact the creator for interviews about methodology and sourcing. Undergraduate papers cite the video. Faculty discussions emerge on when and how YouTube content can function as legitimate historical evidence. Publishers express interest in book adaptations, and documentary producers inquire about expanding the material into a longer series. The video functions both as a finished work and as proof that a real audience exists for nuanced, in-depth history that refuses simplistic narratives. The comment section evolves into a space for dialogue. Threads branch into arguments, some productive, some repetitive. The creator responds selectively, correcting factual misunderstandings and linking to primary sources. One exchange draws particular attention. A commenter, a distant Vanderbilt descendant, writes, "This is difficult to watch, but it is fair. My family's story includes both achievement and harm. Acknowledging both is necessary." Another, a descendant of Newport domestic workers, responds, "Thank you for saying that. It matters." The exchange garners thousands of likes and replies. Viewers describe it as one of the most meaningful conversations they have encountered on the platform. 3 weeks later, a regional newspaper publishes a feature on the video's impact on heritage tourism in Newport. Reporters interview guides, museum staff, and visitors who specifically came because they saw the video. The conclusion is clear. Interest in the breakers has not waned, but it has transformed. Visitors now ask more questions, focusing on the people who worked there, not just the family whose name is on the gate. The video settles into the platform's recommendation algorithm. Views continue to rise gradually. It appears alongside content on history, architecture, labor, inequality, and museum curation. Teachers add it to playlists. It begins to function as both reference and entertainment. The creator continues to receive messages from viewers uncovering personal connections. A woman discovers her great-great-aunt's employment records at another Newport estate. A man learns his grandfather worked as a breaker's groundskeeper in the 1930s. Details never shared in family conversations. These small discoveries accumulate, not in dramatic bursts, but in quiet increments that subtly reshape public understanding of the Gilded Age, not as pure aspiration, nor as unmitigated exploitation, but as a complex reality that demands multiple perspectives. The video becomes part of an evolving conversation, adding layers to the story of wealth, labor, and human experience intertwined within the breakers.
The view counter ticks upward. The comment section grows. The video now resides in the digital archive, accessible to anyone with an internet connection and 28 minutes to spare. Its long-term impact remains unknown. History is enduring. Online platforms are fleeting. Yet for now, the story reaches people, provokes questions, and amplifies voices that were long silent, ensuring that the mansion is understood not just as architecture, but as a human ecosystem of ambition, labor, and legacy. Outside, the ocean continues its relentless assault against the cliffs below the breakers. Waves pound rocks carved by centuries of tides. The house, perched above, endures the storm, a silent witness to both the wealth that built it and the labor that sustained it. Visitors walk the paths, cameras in hand, interpreting the house through their own lens of knowledge, curiosity, and moral framework. Each person contributes a new layer to the ongoing story. The Breakers reminds us that permanence is an illusion. Money cannot stop decay, nor can grandeur alone ensure remembrance. Yet carefully preserved evidence, the house, the ledgers, photographs, letters, and stories can create understanding. It is fragile, maintained only by those who recognize its value and choose to invest in its survival. The mansion and its legacy continue to challenge perceptions, a monument to achievement, a record of inequality, a canvas for dialogue across generations.
History, after all, does not dictate conclusions. It offers traces, clues, and artifacts. It is up to each observer to interpret, question, and learn. The Breakers, standing above the Atlantic for more than a century, endures as both spectacle and lesson. Its stones speaking to ambition, labor, and the choices that determine what survives. And as waves break against the cliffs, the house waits patiently, ready for the next generation to step through its gates, confront the contradictions, and decide what this century-old legacy truly means. The Breakers opens its doors to visitors at 10 a.m. each morning from April through December, but long before the first ticket is scanned, the estate is already awake. Security patrols the grounds at dawn, ensuring the cliffside paths and gardens are safe. Conservators move silently through the rooms, inspecting walls and ceilings for cracks, leaks, or any overnight damage from shifts in temperature and humidity. Guides review their schedules, rehearse key points, and prepare for school groups and bus tours. In roughly 2 hours, the house transforms from a silent, empty shell into a fully functioning museum.
This daily metamorphosis has repeated in some form for more than 70 years. Visitor numbers ebb and flow with the seasons. Summer draws the largest crowds, with up to 3,000 people arriving on peak days in July and August. Autumn remains busy, particularly on weekends when New England's foliage attracts tourists. Winter is quieter. In January and February, the house closes entirely to the public, giving staff the chance to tackle noisy, dusty, or disruptive conservation work that cannot be done while visitors roam the halls. On average, roughly 400,000 people pass through the breakers each year. Their tickets do more than grant access, they keep the mansion alive. Annual ticket revenue totals about $12 million, funding daily operations, staff salaries, utilities, insurance, and routine maintenance. Donations and grants supplement these funds, supporting larger projects such as roof campaigns, stone restoration, and the careful conservation of furniture, textiles, and paintings.
The budget is balanced, but only just. Some years end with a small surplus, while others require drawing from reserves. The Breakers is the flagship property of the Preservation Society of Newport County. While the organization manages several historic estates, it is this mansion that generates most of the income sustaining the rest. Remove public access, and the numbers collapse. Keeping the Breakers standing and presentable costs roughly $3 million per year before accounting for unexpected emergencies. Major capital projects arrive on their own timetable. A single roof replacement completed in 2015 cost approximately $5 million. Future repairs are unlikely to be cheaper. Without constant investment, historic sites inevitably enter a stage of controlled decline. Rooms close, maintenance cycles stretch, some areas slowly deteriorate. Many estates face this reality. Caretakers must save what they can while documenting what they cannot. The Breakers has not yet reached that point. Visitor revenue remains strong. Public interest has not waned. For now, the mansion survives in the present tense, but the long-term future is uncertain. Climate change introduces a new layer of risk. Sea levels rise steadily, storms strike with greater intensity, and the cliff edge erodes inch by inch. Coastal landmarks confront challenges that the original preservationists in 1948 could not have imagined. In 2018, the Preservation Society commissioned engineering and environmental studies. The results were sobering, though not catastrophic. The mansion sits far enough back from the cliff to remain structurally sound for decades, possibly centuries, but erosion is relentless. Storm surges reach higher. Warmer, wetter air accelerates the decay of stone and metal. Adapting to these conditions demands additional spending. Upgraded drainage, enhanced climate control systems to manage humidity swings, protective treatments for exterior stone, and emergency plans for extreme weather events. Each line item increases the cost of keeping the Breakers open. The question quietly emerges: how long can a building designed as a private summer residence function as a high-traffic, nearly year-round museum? No one can answer with certainty. The Breakers has already defied multiple predictions. When it opened to the public in 1948, some observers estimated it would last barely 20 years before the cost of preservation became unsustainable. In the 1970s, skeptics worried that heritage tourism might fade, leaving estates like this stranded. Those forecasts proved wrong. The institution adapted, fundraising diversified, programming expanded. Public curiosity proved more resilient than anyone anticipated. Yet, survival in the past offers no guarantee for the future. Every season,
every storm, every visitor carries the weight of sustaining the mansion. The Breakers endures not because wealth built it, but because commitment and curiosity keep it alive. Each ticket scanned, each donation, each carefully executed restoration is another line of defense against time, decay, and the relentless forces of nature. The house, perched above the Atlantic, remains a reminder. Grandeur alone cannot protect legacy, but careful stewardship can give it a fighting chance.
The Breakers exists in a constant tension between preservation and access, between historical accuracy and modern expectations, between the story the Vanderbilts intended to project and the story historians and curators tell today. That tension is not a flaw. It has been built into the mansion since the very moment it opened to paying visitors. The instant strangers stepped through the front door in 1948, the Breakers ceased to be a purely private symbol and became something else. Not necessarily better or worse, just fundamentally different. What the mansion represents continues to shift with time. In 1948, it was framed largely as proof of Gilded Age excess, a warning about fortunes that rose fast and fell faster. In the 1960s and 70s, attention turned to its architectural significance, a masterpiece worth preserving even if its origins were complicated. More recently, the narrative has expanded to embrace the full tangle of American history: concentrated wealth and hard labor, staggering beauty and visible exploitation, dreams and consequences, all contained within 70 stone and marble rooms. Future interpreters will bring their own priorities. They will ask new questions, notice details others overlooked, and draw lessons from the same staircase, the same hall, the same long corridors. The physical structure itself changes only slowly: a repaired cornice here, a reinforced beam there. The marble remains marble. The Atlantic stretches beyond the lawn. The service stairs remain steep and narrow. The Great Hall still draws people to lean back, tilt their heads, and look up in awe. What evolves is understanding, what we choose to see, what we decide to emphasize, what we feel responsible for passing on. Morning light spills into the Great Hall. Dust motes float through the beams like slow-moving snow. Outside, the first tour bus of the day pulls up. Visitors step down, phones in hand, already angling for their first shot. They will walk through the same spaces once crossed by the Vanderbilts, in gowns and tails. They will sleep in different beds, hold different jobs, live in a different economy, but for a short time they share this architecture across more than a century.
Reactions will vary. Some will see only beauty. Some will focus on injustice. Some will feel both at once. Some will be silent with awe. Others will be frustrated by the crowds. Some will snap a few photos and move on without reflection. The house accommodates all of it. It does not argue. It does not defend itself. It simply stands, as it has since 1895, as evidence of what was built, what was lost, what was preserved, and at what cost. Below the cliff, the Atlantic continues its work on the rocks. The waves were here long before the first stone was laid, and they will still be here long after the last stone falls. For now, two forces coexist: stone and water, memory and time. The past is held in place at considerable cost, so that the present can examine it closely, ask questions, learn, and decide what lessons to carry forward. The doors open. The first visitors step inside. The house begins another day doing what it has done for nearly 77 years, offering its rooms as a classroom, a mirror, a storybook, for anyone willing to look beyond the surface and see not just wealth and splendor, but labor, history, and the human effort it took to make and maintain it all.